Most people assume that when everything falls apart at once, they did something wrong. They replay every decision, every prayer, every moment they think they failed God. They shrink back, they go quiet. They start believing that the chaos surrounding their life is proof that heaven has turned its back on them. But what if the opposite is true? What if the devastation you're walking through right now is not a sign that God has left, but a sign that hell has noticed you? You've been hit from every direction lately. Your relationships feel like they're unraveling at the seams. Your mind won't go quiet at night, no matter how tired your body is. And somewhere deep inside, underneath the exhaustion, you feel like you're losing a war you didn't even sign up to fight. Here's what I need you to understand before we go any further. If you don't recognize what is actually happening in the spiritual realm around your life, you will keep blaming yourself for an attack that was never about your failure. It was about your potential. Here are 6 signs the enemy is specifically targeting you and what each one reveals about the power you are carrying. The first sign is one that almost everyone misreads, and misreading it will cost you. You've been watching everything break down at the same time. Not one problem, not 2. Multiple areas of your life simultaneously, all coming undone at once. Your finances hit a wall. Your health starts showing symptoms no one can explain. A relationship you thought was solid cracks overnight. Your peace, that quiet inner peace you used to be able to find, it's just gone. And you're standing in the middle of it thinking, what did I do to deserve this? I remember a season like that in my own life. I lost my job. A friendship I had built for years ended without warning, and within the same 60 days, my body started showing symptoms that sent me to 3 different doctors, none of whom had a clear answer. I remember sitting in my car one night, in a parking lot, just completely hollowed out. I thought God was either punishing me or he had simply moved on. What I didn't understand then, what I wish someone had told me, is that coordinated attack is a spiritual pattern. It is not random bad luck. It is not karma. It is not a sign that you are cursed. The book of Job shows us exactly what this looks like. In Job chapter 1, verses 9 and 10, Satan stands before God and says this about Job. Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? Satan's argument was that Job was only faithful because God had protected him. The moment that protection shifted, everything came at once. His livestock, his children, his health, all of it, in rapid succession. It wasn't coincidence. It was a coordinated spiritual assault designed to make Job believe that God had abandoned him. Here's the truth. The enemy does not scatter his attacks randomly. When he comes for someone with genuine spiritual purpose, he comes from multiple directions at once, because he wants you overwhelmed. He wants you so busy putting out fires that you never stop to ask why everything is burning at the same time. Think about the last 3 months of your life. Is it possible that what has felt like a string of bad luck is actually something more intentional? Because if it is, if you are sitting inside a coordinated collapse right now, that is not a sign that God forgot you. That is a sign that something in your life has caught the wrong kind of attention. But the chaos on the outside is only half of it. The second sign happens on the inside in your mind, and it is brutal. There is a kind of mental warfare that doesn't look dramatic from the outside. Nobody sees it. You're still showing up to work. You're still answering texts. You're still sitting in church with your face composed. But on the inside, your mind is running a loop that will not stop. Thoughts about your worth. Thoughts about your past mistakes, dragged back up like they just happened yesterday. Sudden waves of doubt, not about small things, but about everything. About whether your prayers mean anything. About whether God is actually real. About whether you were ever really saved, really called, really seen. And underneath all of it, a kind of mental fatigue so deep that even resting doesn't touch it. I once sat across from a man who had been in ministry for 15 years. Solid faith. Deep roots. He told me that one morning he woke up and simply could not remember why he believed any of it. Nothing had changed in his circumstances. No tragedy, no moral failure, no crisis he could point to. He said it felt like something had reached into his chest and turned a dial. One day the fire was there. The next morning it wasn't. And he spent 6 months convinced that it was his own fault, that he had drifted, or sinned, or simply run out of faith. What he was experiencing wasn't spiritual failure. It was spiritual attack. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 4 and 5 says this: "The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. Paul is not writing about random negative thinking. He is writing about strongholds, fortified mental structures built through planted thoughts, one brick at a time. The enemy doesn't always come for your behavior first. He comes for your mind. Because if he can get inside your thinking, he can alter everything that follows your decisions, your relationships, your willingness to pursue what God placed inside you. And here is what I want you to sit with. The intensity of the mental warfare you've been experiencing is not proportional to how much you've failed. It is proportional to how much you carry. The man who woke up without his faith that morning, he went on to build one of the most significant ministries I've ever seen. The attack on his mind was not a verdict. It was a preview of what the enemy was afraid of. Are the thoughts that have been tormenting you actually yours? Or have you been faithfully listening to a voice that was never meant to live inside your head? Because there is a difference. And learning to tell that difference might be the most important thing you do this year. And it doesn't stop with your mind. The third sign shows up in the people closest to you, and this one is the one that tends to leave the deepest wounds. There is a particular kind of pain that comes from relational betrayal. It's different from other pain. Grief from loss has a shape you can hold. Disappointment from failure has a lesson you can learn. But the pain of being turned on by someone you trusted, someone who sat at your table, who knew your story, who you would have defended without hesitation, that pain doesn't have clean edges. It just bleeds. And if you've been experiencing sudden conflict, sudden distance, or sudden betrayal from people you thought were solid in your life, I need you to hear this. You are not being paranoid. You are not overreacting. And it is very likely not a coincidence. I've been blindsided by people I would have trusted with my life. And what wrecked me wasn't just the betrayal itself, it was the speed of it. One season, these people were in my corner. They knew my dreams. They prayed with me. And then, without a clear reason, without a real conversation, something shifted. I found myself eating alone in a season where I thought I had built something lasting. And the silence from people I loved was louder than anything the enemy could have screamed at me directly. Psalm 41 verse 9 says this, "Even my close friend, someone I trusted, one who shared my bread, has turned against me." That is David writing. A man after God's own heart, gutted by someone in his inner circle. But here is what stops me every time I read that verse. Jesus quoted it. In John chapter 13 verse 18, Jesus looked at his disciples the night before the cross and said, "I am not referring to all of you, but this is to fulfill the scripture. He who shared my bread has turned against me." He was talking about Judas. He knew what was coming. He saw it, and he still sat at the table with him. If the Son of God was betrayed by someone he chose, someone he poured into, someone who walked with him and watched miracles happen, then relational betrayal in your life is not a sign of failure. It is not a sign that you trusted wrong or loved foolishly. It is a sign of assignment. The enemy targets your relationships because isolation is one of his most effective weapons. Get someone alone, cut them off from their people, and they become far easier to break. Who has pulled away from you recently in a way that felt spiritually strange, not just human conflict? Not just a season of distance, but something heavier? Something that felt less like a misunderstanding and more like a door being shut from the outside? Because if you can feel that, if you know exactly who I'm talking about, I want you to hold that for a moment. Not in bitterness, not in anger, but with the understanding that what the enemy meant to do through that loss was leave you isolated, hollow, and convinced that you had no one. And what God will do with that same wound is make you someone who can sit with others in their most isolated moments and tell them, "I know what this feels like. And you are not alone." Now, if this is speaking to something real in your life right now, if you've been feeling the weight of coordinated attack, mental warfare, and relational loss all at once, I want you to be part of a community of people who are learning to fight from a place of identity and not fear. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what is coming on this channel is specifically for people who are serious about understanding what they carry and walking in their full purpose. This is not casual content. This is for the ones who are in it. And before we keep going, I want you to drop this in the comments right now. Type, "Lord, I will not quit in the middle of my assignment." Type it out, declare it. Because declaration is not performance, it is a weapon. And somebody scrolling through those comments tonight needs to see that somebody else is still standing. Now let's keep going, because the fourth sign is the one almost nobody talks about, and it might be the most disorienting thing you've experienced in this entire season. Your prayer life has gone dry, not gradually, suddenly. You open your Bible and the words sit flat on the page. You bow your head and the words dissolve before they form a sentence. You go to worship and you watch other people's hands go up, and you feel nothing, not hardness, not rebellion, just nothing. And the silence where God used to be is so loud it fills every quiet moment of your day. And the worst part is that it happened right in the middle of the attack, right when you needed Him most, right when the chaos was at its peak, the relationships were crumbling, and the mental warfare was at its loudest. That is exactly when God went quiet. There was a stretch of about 4 months in my own life where I would sit down with my Bible every morning and feel completely hollow. I would pray and feel like my words hit the ceiling and fell straight back down. I didn't tell anyone, not my pastor, not my closest friends, not the people who looked to me for spiritual steadiness, because I was terrified of what it meant. I thought maybe the silence was the verdict. Maybe I had finally pushed too far, wandered too long, or simply used up whatever grace had been extended to me. I was wrong. But I didn't know that yet. Psalm 22 opens with these words, and I need you to feel the full weight of them. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me, so far from my cries of anguish? I cry out by day, but you do not answer. I cry out by night, and am not given rest. That is David, the man who killed Goliath, who danced before the ark, who wrote songs that have carried millions of people through their darkest moments. And he wrote those words too. He wrote them from inside a silence so heavy it felt like abandonment. And then Jesus hanging on the cross at the moment of maximum suffering, carrying the sin of every human being who would ever live, cried out those exact same words, my God, why have you forsaken me? If spiritual dryness was a sign of failure, Jesus would not have experienced it. If the silence of God meant abandonment, the cross would have been the end of the story. Here is what I've learned. The enemy exploits the silence of God. He moves into that quiet space and begins to whisper that the silence is permanent, that you've been cut off, that what you're feeling is the truth about where you stand. But spiritual dryness in the middle of warfare is not the absence of God. It is the test of whether you will trust Him when you cannot feel Him. It is the moment where faith stops being a feeling and becomes a choice. The fire you felt in your early days with God, the emotion, the electricity, the sense of His nearness that was a gift for the beginning. What He is building in you now, in this dry and quiet season, is something that doesn't require feeling to function, something that holds when the feelings are gone, something that the enemy cannot manipulate because it is no longer tied to an emotional experience. Has the silence of God in your current season made you want to quit, or made you press in harder? Because your answer to that question right now might be one of the most important spiritual decisions you make this year. The fifth sign is more subtle than the rest. It's the one that steals your future quietly, without drama, without a single loud moment, and it is the one the enemy is most patient about. You've been waiting on something, a promise, a door, a breakthrough that every sign pointed toward, and then at the last second, it didn't happen. The job offer fell through. The relationship ended right when it felt like it was finally going somewhere. The opportunity closed before you could walk through it. The thing you had prayed over, believed for, prepared yourself to receive gone. And then it happened again, and again. And slowly, so slowly you almost didn't notice it happening, hope started to feel dangerous. Because hope costs something when it keeps getting disappointed. And at some point, your heart made a quiet decision to stop reaching, stop expecting, stop believing, because the pain of another closed door felt like more than you could carry. There was a woman in our church who had been holding on to a promise from God for 11 years. 11 years of praying the same prayer. 11 years of watching other people receive what she was still waiting for. Every time the door looked like it was about to open, something blocked it. A complication, a reversal, a silence. She told me that in year 10 she almost stopped praying about it entirely. Not out of anger, just out of a quiet, exhausted surrender. She said, I think I've been wrong about what God promised me, and I've decided to make peace with that. In year 12, everything she had waited for came together in the space of a single week. Daniel chapter 10, verses 12 and 13. An angel appears to Daniel after he had been fasting and praying for 21 days with no answer. And the angel says this, Do not be afraid, Daniel. Since the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to them. But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me 21 days. Read that again. Daniel's prayer was heard on day 1. Heaven responded on day 1. But there was warfare in the unseen realm, a spiritual resistance that delayed the answer for 3 weeks. If Daniel had stopped praying on day 20, he would have quit 1 day before the breakthrough. The enemy does not waste his energy blocking things that don't matter. He blocks what he fears. He delays what he knows will be dangerous to his plans once it arrives. And the very promise that has been delayed the longest in your life, the one you've almost given up on, the one that feels too old to still believe in that promise, has been contested because of what it will release when it finally arrives. What have you almost stopped believing for? What promise have you quietly put down because the waiting became too heavy? Because if the delay itself is evidence that the enemy knows what's on the other side of it, what does that tell you about what you're carrying? Don't put it down. Not yet. Not now. You are closer than the silence is telling you. And that brings us to the 6th sign. The one that, once you truly understand it, will reframe everything that has happened to you: the chaos, the mental warfare, the betrayal, the dryness, the delays, all of it. There is something inside you that will not go away. A knowing, a pull, a fire that keeps reigniting no matter how many times circumstance answers to try to drown it. You have felt at some point, maybe many points, that you were built for something significant. Not in an arrogant way. Not in a way you could fully explain to someone else. Just a deep, unshakable sense that there is a reason you are here, that your life is supposed to mean something beyond what you can currently see. And paired with that knowing, like a shadow that follows the light, there has been a relentless resistance, something that seems specifically committed to making sure you never fully walk in what you carry. Something that has come after your confidence, your relationships, your mental clarity, your faith, your momentum. Something that has been working patiently and persistently to keep you small. I've never met a person under serious spiritual attack who wasn't also carrying a serious calling. In 20 years of watching people walk through warfare, that pattern has never broken once. The intensity of opposition in a person's life is not random. Hell does not waste resources. The enemy does not mobilize against empty vessels. He does not spend energy targeting people who pose no spiritual threat. Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 5. God speaks to Jeremiah and says, "Before I formed you in the womb I knew you. Before you were born I set you apart." Before Jeremiah drew his first breath, before he made a single decision, before he succeeded or failed at anything, he was already known, already set apart, already assigned. The enemy understood that assignment before Jeremiah did, and he came for it early. He came for it hard. He came for it from multiple directions at once, because that is what he does when the calling is real. Here is what I need you to carry out of this video. The enemy studied you before you knew yourself. He targeted the assignment before you ever accepted it. Every coordinated attack, every planted thought, every fractured relationship, every closed door, none of it was random. All of it was aimed at something specific, something God placed inside you before you were born, something the enemy has been trying to reach and destroy since before you had a name for it. But what he meant to stop, God already sealed, and what he meant to use to break you, God has already written into the testimony that will set someone else free. What does the war you've been fighting tell you about what you're carrying? Because if the intensity of the attack against your life is proportional to the size of your calling, you are far more dangerous to the kingdom of darkness than you have ever allowed yourself to believe. I started this by asking you a question. I told you that most people assume chaos means God left, that when everything falls apart at once, it must mean they did something wrong. I want to close with the other side of that truth. The enemy does not attack empty vessels. He does not send coordinated chaos after people who pose no threat. He does not plant relentless thoughts in minds that carry nothing worth silencing. He does not fracture relationships around people whose connections don't matter to the mission. He does not dry up the faith of people whose faith cannot move anything. Every sign we've walked through today, the simultaneous collapse, the mental warfare, the betrayal, the spiritual dryness, the blocked doors, the relentless resistance against your calling. None of it is a verdict against you. All of it is evidence of what you carry. You are not a casualty. You are a target. And there is a massive difference between the two. A casualty is someone caught in crossfire they had nothing to do with. A target is someone the enemy looked at specifically and said, that one needs to be stopped. You were not caught in crossfire. You were chosen for an assignment, and the war around your life is the proof. Drop this in the comments right now. Type, I declare the enemy overplayed his hand. What he meant to destroy me, God will use to define me. Type it out in full. Say it like you mean it, because declaration is not performance, it is a weapon, and it is yours to use. And if you know someone right now who is in the middle of a war, they don't understand someone who is exhausted, confused, and quietly starting to believe they are losing, share this video with them today. Not because it's content, because someone you love needs to know they are not losing their mind. They are in a battle, and they were built to win it. You are more powerful than you think.